Welcome to Backyard Cigars. And before you even think it, I will say it. You can root and be a part of a losing team, but never have a loser's attitude. Always have a winner's attitude. That's all I've got to say in regards to that. But today I'm here with the Griffin's Robusto, manufactured by Davidoff. They're headquartered in the Dominican Republic. This particular Robusto is wrapped with an Ecuadorian Connecticut shade wrapper. The binder and the filler are from the Dominican Republic. The filler in question from the Dominican Republic actually hails from the Cibao Valley, which, if you don't remember, I've mentioned before, there's a lot of emphasis on high quality tobaccos coming from this region. So that's something that I'm looking forward to here. Working my way back, I do feel that my taste buds, my palate is a little more in sync today, and I'm very happy about that because I really want to savor these Dominican tobaccos. Now, this is a mild cigar, which is what I wanted to smoke today. I was in the mood for a mild cigar, sort of just get in tune with the flavors of cigars once again after my situation. So, now initially, when this cigar started off, it was some mild white pepper notes, a little bit of spices, and now as I've smoked it down a little bit, I'm getting a little bit more of a creamy note, but it comes and goes. I'm hoping that it returns. Right now it's just a nice mild cigar. The body it's a mild bodied cigar, but the flavor is picking up. I'm getting a little bit more flavor from it now, and I'm looking forward to this cigar. I'm just going to take a little break, smoke a little more, and I'll come right back. Now, you all know how I love to do research and just find interesting things in regards to cigars and their history, or anything in particular with regards to our smoking habits from the past, and just all kinds of oddities. So today I want to just read a little bit. I found this book, and it's called Smoking, A World of Curious Facts, Queer Fancies, and Lively Anecdotes About Pipes, Tobacco, and Cigars. Now, this book was published by Union Book Company in Brooklyn, New York in 1891 by George Manson. And George Manson had some things to say about how he felt, not only about pipes, tobacco, and cigars, but he also has a section on snuff tobacco as well. And while I won't be reading about that, I do want to delve into a little bit of what he wrote back in 1891 about pipes, tobacco, and cigars. So if you remember, I did a video on cigar smoking and masks, and I talked a little bit about what went down in the back in the epidemic of 1918, and how they dealt with masks and so forth because so many people were getting sick. Well, in 1891, or actually 1888 to 1890, there was a flu pandemic as well, that they called the Russian flu or the Asiatic flu, and it spread through a lot of Europe, and about 1 million people died. So there were some things written in regards to that, and I just want to touch a little bit on that. So George goes on to say, whilst the Great Plague raged in London, tobacco was recommended by the faculty and generally taken as a preventive against infection. It was popularly reported that no tobacconists or their households were afflicted by the plague. Physicians who visited the sick took it very freely. The men who went round with the dead carts had their pipes continually alight. This gave tobacco a new popularity, and it became a popular cure of the day. The schoolboys at Eton were obliged to smoke in the school every morning, and they were whipped if they did not. Now just think about that. Children were actually, at that point in time, given pipes, and their parents would, or in this case their mothers, would pack their pipes with tobacco, and they would send them off to school. And at a certain point of the day, the teacher would take the children outside, and the children would light their pipes and begin to smoke it, because the belief was that tobacco would protect you or lessen the effects of the plague. And to some degree, they believed that it made you immune to the plague, the Asiatic flu, the Russian flu of 1888 to 1891. And there were about 2 or 3 waves to this pandemic, and for a lot of reasons, people believed that this was more than just a therapeutic. This was something that would shield you from this sickness. Now, obviously, this is before 1900, and people listened to their doctors in a different way. Education, the education level of the common man wasn't as of today, as it is today. Robinson Crusoe, the explorer, the traveler, seen many movies on him, right? He writes a lot about how, as a medicinal, what you have with medicine and tobacco, he was out there in the jungles and he got sick and he needed something to alleviate his pain, his suffering, and so he would take some tobacco, smoke it, dip it in rum, and all kinds of things that he felt were helpful with tobacco. So it was a medicine back in the day. Manson's feelings on tobacco and animals. So the enemies of the weed say that tobacco is a poison because animals will not use it. A Berlin professor, an artist, however, who has lately experimented in the zoological gardens, declares that common brown bears are genuine enthusiasts for tobacco. That's right, bears. Okay. Now this professor goes on to say, when I puff my cigar, smoke into their cage, he remarks, they rush to the front, rubbing their noses and backs against the bars through which the smoke has penetrated. The professor, with some temerity, once experimented on the lion. The creature was asleep, and this was the moment selected for puffing a volume of tobacco smoke in his face. Did he at once wake up with a savage growl, lash his tail, and springing at the bars, shake the massive iron? Not at all. He awoke, stood on his legs, which seems a natural enough attitude to adopt, and sneezed powerfully. Then he quietly laid down on his side and elevated his nose, as if asking for a second dose. It may be news to some naturalists to hear that goats, stags, and llamas all devour tobacco and cigars with remarkable satisfaction. It is certainly somewhat of a waste of the material to let a prime Havana be bolted in one gulp by an antelope. But the professor was actuated by a praiseworthy desire to discover scientific facts. and also by a wish to get on good terms with creatures whom it was his business to sketch. I made a personal friend, he writes, of an exceedingly malicious guanaco, or wild llama, by simply feeding him again and again with tobacco. Brother Gray, said one clergyman to another, is it possible you smoke tobacco? Pray give up the unseemly practice. And this is something that was said to him by someone else. And he goes on to say that it is at a sitting which had the effect of curing him. So he has quite a lot to say. And I've got to say that this cigar, hitting its final stride in the final third, the aroma has really, really taken over. It's just a great smelling cigar. It's mild, but it's full of flavor. And it really, you can see the burn line has not given me any issues whatsoever. It's really pleasant. It's everything I expected. Davidoff is obviously known for high quality cigars. This was part of a sampler pack for me, and I'm enjoying this. So what's next for this writer here, George Manson? And I will tell you that he's got quite a lot to say. So he says, we are so accustomed to hearing about the ill effects of smoking on the young that it seems strange to read that in England, in the 17th century, children going to school carried with their books a pipe of tobacco. Now, I touched on this briefly, but I want you to read, I want you to hear me read what actually was occurring and what he wrote down. They carried with their books a pipe of tobacco, which their mothers took care to fill early in the morning. At a certain time in school, everyone laid aside his book to light his pipe, the master smoking with them, and teaching them how to hold their pipes and draw in the tobacco, thus getting them used to the weed from their youth as a practice absolutely necessary for a man's health. Whew, how long have we come? It has been quite a journey for tobacco and the way that we see it, the way that we perceive tobacco, the qualities that we take from it, and how we make use of them in our daily lives. So while nowadays we are clearly enamored with our cigars because of the peace and joy that they bring us, the tranquility that they bring us, there was a time when the fanaticism for tobacco, cigars, was so great that they attributed the tobacco with medicinal properties. Now, that isn't to say that tobacco is completely devoid of medicinal properties, but perhaps not in the way that they thought it was possible. So he goes on to write that the Aborigines of America were the first to make tobacco into the rude form of a cigar. Columbus says that the natives rolled the tobacco into a tube or sort of small funnel formed of the palm leaf, in which the dried leaves of the tobacco were placed. Fire was applied to it, and the smoke was inhaled. He speaks of this kind of smoking being much used afterwards by captains of ships trading to the West Indies, and says that they attributed it to the power of allaying hunger and thirst, exhilarating the spirits, and renovating the animal powers. Interesting. Providing vigor, putting hunger off. We know that when you smoke tobacco, you can kind of hold hunger off a little bit better. That's something that I, was told about 25 years ago, 20 years ago in regards to cigarettes. Yeah, look at all these models and they're smoking cigarettes. They're hungry. They're just smoking the cigarettes to, keep that hunger down. And so he's saying that these captains use tobacco in such a manner to help them get through the day, get through the nights. The cigar began to be in vogue among the Spaniards at the beginning of the 17th century. They smoked the leaf rolled simply in a leaf of maize, corn. According to the Indian fashion, although highly appreciated in Spain, the cigar did not become acclimated in France much before 1830. So he's just, he writes a timeline of the popularity of cigars and tobacco, and pretty much just tries to let us know when the popularity began and how it traveled throughout the countries. Smoking is a common social custom in Paraguay. Servants in a home bring in a brass vessel containing a few coals of fire and a plate of cigars. Men, women, and children smoke in the office, the drawing room, at the dinner table, and even at the balls and theaters. It is the same in Central America, where every gentleman carries in his pocket a silver case with a long string of cotton, steel, and flint, and one of the offices of gallantry is to strike a light. By doing it well, he may kindle a flame in a lady's heart. At all events, to do it bungingly would be ill-bred. So now he's telling us that, look, if you want to score, if you want to impress the ladies, then you've got to know how to light that cigar. You've got to make it happen effortlessly. You want to impress the ladies, you've got to make it happen, and you've got to look fashionable while you're doing it. And you may tickle the fancy of a lovely lady. This just reminds me of how men are enticed into certain products by the promise that if they purchase this, if they do this, then they will attract paramours. And a lot of men obviously fall for it because we're men and we're looking for an easy out, and we're looking to do whatever we can to score sometimes. And back in the day, hey, if you had a cigar and you knew how to light it correctly and you could do it fashionably well and effortlessly, you had it going on. You had things going on for you. Now, here's the thing about smoking cigars and the business of politics. I always like to think that, or I used to, that you should leave politics out of smoking a cigar. But the reality is, as I was informed by the owner of Corona Cigars, that smoking and politics go hand in hand. And nothing proves this more to me than what I'm about to read right now. Because he sent me something as well, detailing a history of tobacco, cigars with politics. But this really interests me. Bismarck, the Prussian statesman, tells how all the members of the military commission of the Diet at Frankfurt took to smoking at their sittings. At first, the president, Count Rechberg, was the only one who smoked until one day Bismarck coolly asked him for a light and began smoking a cigar. The other delegates wrote to their respective governments for instructions, and the subject, being a grave matter, required 6 months for reflection. Meanwhile, the Hanoverian representative smoked so as to be even with Bismarck. Seeing which, others produced a cigar so as to be equal with him. The last 2 delegates to join the circle of smokers were not in the habit of using the weed. As wise diplomats, however, they could not allow their colleagues to blow clouds of smoke in their faces without blowing back. The honor of their respective countries was involved. One of them, says Bismarck, brought out an indefinable cigar, pale yellow, thin, tapering, and enormously long. He smoked it bravely, with all his might, and almost to the stump, thus giving a magnificent example of devotion to his country. So you see, Nub Nation was alive even back then, because to take it down to the nub was a sign of his devotion to his country. It was saying, basically, to the rest of the delegates that I will outsmoke you, even if I have to take it down to the nub, the stump, as they called it. And he was admired for it. And no, the description of the cigar tells me that it was more than likely a Gran Lancero, possibly 7.5 inches long, ring gauge 38, 39, because that was what was considered a big cigar back then. In 1871, at the time of one of the interviews between Prince Bismarck and Jules Favre, the Chancellor began by asking the French statesman if he would have a cigar. Jules Favre bowed and replied that he never smoked. "You are wrong," said Bismarck. Whenever gentlemen begin a conversation that may sometimes lead to discussions and occasion violent language, it is much better to smoke while talking. As you smoke, he continued, lighting a fine Havana, the cigar that you hold and handle and do not wish to let fall paralyzes somewhat the physical movements, morally, without depriving us in any way of our mental faculties. It lulls us slightly. The cigar is a diversion, the blue smoke which mounts spirally and that you follow with your eyes, in spite of yourself, renders you more conciliatory. You are happy, your sight is occupied, your hand is retained, and your sense of smell is satisfied. And with that, I have to take a puff. Incredible aroma on this cigar. You are disposed to make mutual concessions. Well, our work as diplomats is made of reciprocal and unceasing concessions. You who do not smoke have one advantage over me. You are more wide awake. But you have one disadvantage. You are more inclined to be hasty, he said with a sly smile. So I'll add my own. Another famous statesman found the cigar useful in diplomacy. Mazzini, the Italian exile, was forewarned that his assassination had been planned, and that men had been dispatched to London for that purpose. But he made no attempt to exclude them from his house. One day, the conspirators entered his room and found him listlessly smoking. You can just imagine it now. He was just sitting there, relaxed, just smoking a cigar, not even thinking about the assassination attempt that was unfolding. "Take cigars, gentlemen," was his instant invitation. Chatting and hesitation on their part followed. "But you do not proceed to business, gentlemen," said Mazzini. "I believe your intention is to kill me." The astounded miscreants fell on their knees and at length departed with a generous pardon accorded them, whilst a longer puff of smoke than usual was the only malediction sent after them. So I don't know how true that story is, but it's pretty cool, right? That men burst into your home with the intention of killing you, and you calmly, coolly sit there smoking a cigar, offer them cigars, maybe a glass of brandy, and chat with them, and they fall into this trance and become quite docile and don't carry out their execution or their assassination attempt of you. So I would say they didn't get paid for for their assassination attempt, and I would say that they better disappear. But another man lives another day. Thackeray, another diplomat, says that the man who smokes has a great advantage in conversation. You may, he says, stop talking if you like, but the breaks of silence never seem disagreeable, being filled up by the puffing of the smoke. Hence there is no awkwardness in resuming the conversation, no straining for effect. Sentiments are delivered in a grave, easy manner. The cigar harmonizes the society and soothes at once the speaker and the subject whereon he converses. I have no doubt that it is from the habit of smoking that Turks and American Indians are such monstrous, well-bred men. How precious a cigar may be to a smoker is illustrated by an anecdote told by Bismarck himself, who says that at a certain point he had only one cigar in his pocket, which he carefully guarded as a miser does his treasure. He looked forward to the happy hour when he should enjoy it after the battle. But, he says, I had miscalculated my chances. A poor dragoon lay helpless, with both arms crushed, murmuring for something to refresh him. I felt in my pockets and found that I had only gold, which would be of no use to him. But stay, I had still my treasured cigar. I lighted it for him, and I placed it between his teeth. You should have seen the poor fellow's grateful smile. I never enjoyed a cigar so much as the one which I did not smoke. That right there is probably one of the best examples of the type of giving and loving attitude and heart that we as cigar smokers have when we share our cigars, when we share our experiences about cigars. But more than anything, when we see someone and we say to them, hey, try this cigar, have this cigar. Will you? Enjoy this because I enjoy this. And maybe I can't enjoy it right now, but I want you to enjoy it. And that just says a lot about us as cigar smokers. This cigar is going to be smoked down probably till I get to right about the band, which is very close to nub territory. It's mild enough for me to feel comfortable doing that. And I'm really pleased with how this cigar not only burned, the draw, the aroma, but the flavor overall. I reckon that I would probably say I like it even just a little more than my Oliva Connecticut shade cigar that I normally have when I'm in the mood for a mild cigar. I'm gonna read this anonymous poem by a lover of the leaf from the 17th century. It might be the 18th century, I'm not sure. And it is titled The Confession of a Cigar Smoker. I owe to smoking more or less. Through life the whole of my success. With my cigar I'm sage and wise. Without I'm dull as cloudy skies. When smoking, all my ideas soar. When not, they sink upon the floor. The greatest men have all been smokers, and so were all the greatest jokers. Then ye, who'd bid adieu to care, come here and smoke it into the air. I don't know who wrote that, but it pleases me to read that. So, I leave you today letting you know that I feel I am fully healed. I'm back. I'm so excited that I made the camera shake. But thank you for watching, folks. See you next time on Backyard Cigars.